this video based on the idea of what a slave contract is. First, let me say, for anybody who's not in the community, slave contracts really are not worth the paper they're written on. It is a nice little thing called the Emancipation Proclamation, which makes slavery against the law. Thing is, really, they're not a defense. You can't use them in any legal purposes. People who have tried to use them for legal purposes, such as a recent case, they're not worth the paper they're written on. In fact, actually, they can be used against you as a way to show that you are doing illegal action. With that being said, with all of that out there, slave contracts are really a great idea if they're written properly. And what I mean by if they're written properly is, if you write it in a way that makes it extremely clear what both parties have to deal with. Most of the slave contracts out there that I've seen, and you can get online and do research and just search slave contracts, BDSM slave contracts, and you'll find a lot of examples. Most of the examples that I've seen are usually written with the express purpose of being primarily on the submissive, on the slave. What her responsibilities are, what she has to do, what she's allowed to do, what she's not allowed to do, what she's supposed to do. It doesn't talk about things like slave vetoes. It doesn't talk about what the responsibilities are of the dominant or the master or the owner. It doesn't talk about where their relationship is and where the responsibilities are in each part of the relationship. For me, if I'm going to do a slave contract, it's got to be written in a way that it's put into the concept of a contract, but it's really more of a document to outlay a relationship. This is not something that exists anywhere else in the world as far as I know. Not even in prenuptial agreements. This is about as close as to the closest example of this is a prenuptial agreement, except for what this talks about what happens in the relationship, not what happens after the relationship. A good slave contract should be written in a way where both the dominant and the submissive talk about what they want out of the relationship and what they expect from the other person. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more demands upon the submissive than there is on the dominant as of things to do. But there are definite times where the dominant needs to be written into this as this is what the dominant needs to do. For example, part of my responsibility with my girls is making sure that they take care of themselves. Keeping on them, making sure that they take care of themselves, and making sure that they keep track of themselves and their world. I have a responsibility to not just sit idly by as they do things. My job is to be there to correct them, to punish them if necessary, and to do things that are absolutely needed to continue this dynamic between the two people. Their jobs are to do the things that please me, to do to put everything in an order, a way that makes me happy, on and so forth. What I will tell anybody who's going to attempt to write it is, like I said in the beginning, if you think this is something you can take into court and go, look, I have a slave contract and it's totally fine, you're an idiot. Several court cases have tried. There's been people that have tried that, and guess what? They wound up using the slave contract as a way to go after them. Know who you're dealing with. The slave contract should be written in a way that it is set up to be a document about the relationship, not about the security of the relationship. If you can't trust the person you're with 100%, then why are you with them? If you can't trust them, then don't play with them. Don't be with them. Especially don't take them in as a slave if you don't feel you can trust them. To me, whenever you do this kind of relationship, the absolute necessity of trust and consent are something that needs to be refocused all the time. The only thing a slave contract does is lay out who's responsible for what each party is to do, and why. It is not an ironclad, 100% follow to the letter deal, because it can't legally be enforced. It's a guideline. I one of my probably the best way to really lay out what this is the pirate code. You can get online and search the pirate code. It came up in the Pirate of the Caribbean movie. It's not, yes, it's a set of rules, but it's more guidelines than anything else. That's what a slave contract is. It's guidelines to the relationship. And there are within the contract, there should be outs for both parties. One of the things that I do not like seeing in contracts is there is no way for the submissive to leave the relationship. There has to be a way where if she absolutely wants to leave, there's an out. But there is a proper way to do it. It's not just a screw it and leave. Because there's been a lot of things that have happened recently, especially, again, and I keep bringing up this court case, and I'll put a link, in the section to talk, in the sections up there to talk about it, so you can read the story. Do not do a contract unless you absolutely know the person. My thing is, I wouldn't do a slave contract with somebody unless I've been with them for at least 6 months to a year. But I also don't collar somebody unless I've been with them for at least, to put a slave collar on them unless they've been with them for at least a year. But that's a different video. So, what I'm going to say in closing is really simple. Do not write a slave contract that you think is legally binding, because it can't be. Write a contract that is going to be used by the two of you to outline your relationship. That's it. I know people who post their slave contracts up on their wall, put it in a frame, very nice and pretty, lay it so it's something they can remind themselves all the time. Treat it as a living document. If you need to sit down and change it, have mechanisms built in the contract that allow for the change. Have ways to be set up that you can sit and talk about it and not just let it exist. Take your time. Do it right. Last thing, be smart about it. Only an idiot is going to turn around and try to force somebody to live by the contract. As I said, it's illegal to do that. If you don't have consent, you don't have anything. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything. The contract is as good as the paper it's written on. It's worthless unless you and the person you're with have absolute faith and trust in each other, and there's absolute consent every single time. Now, you don't need to walk up and say, do you give me consent to beat you? That is a necessity. There is an unwritten rule, an unwritten language of consent. Anybody who's been around this lifestyle long enough knows it, knows how it works. Do your homework, do it right, and be well and safe.